terrorism or right or wrong or anything, if we can't have a discussion about human decent life and whether or not it deserves to exist. Because the argument here, ironically, is that those 1,200 Israelis deserve to live. And yes, they did. They did deserve to live.
Yes.
But the massive amount, the continuing count that I don't even know at this point, I don't even know it. And
Last I
it's,
heard 22,000. It's
thank
probably
you.
a
That's
couple thousand
insane.
than that. Yeah.
So those people didn't deserve to live because, and if we're going to go with a numbers game,
Yeah.
where
And
is
most of
it?
those are children, by the way. Most of those are children.
At least half, almost half of them are children, and that is disgusting in itself. So what the young people are saying, Kamala, is they want that to stop until we can have a conversation about the 1,200 that were murdered. Can
Yeah.
we please do that? And coming from young people who have what we traditionally understand as less wisdom than older people, just because they haven't been around long enough, maybe not been in enough circumstances and weaseled their way out of things and learned how to navigate life the way that maybe a 40, 50, 60-year-old would. But
They also haven't been as thoroughly trained to go along and get along as some people who are a little bit older.
right. But, and here is another one, Kamala. They obviously get the lesson of this horrible tale is that human life is precious, it cannot be replaced, and we need to protect it at all costs, whether they are Israeli or Gazan. Now, we can't do anything about the people who have died, but we can do something about the people who are being murdered now. We
Yeah.
can stop it now.
Yeah.
That's all they're asking.
Yeah.
And they, as a large majority of the electorate coming up this year, they will possibly have a deciding factor over who gets into office and not just the presidency. We need to take back the House and not just the federal level. We need to take as many states away from these people as possible with the governorship
Yes.
and the
Yes.
state houses, even all the way down to the PTA. If you can vote for your school district, the person who, the superintendent, vote for them too. I'm serious. I was reading today that Moms for Liberty in South Carolina just opened a charter school using taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Charter schools are notorious for keeping kids of color, kids with disabilities out and
Yeah.
using taxpayer money to fund more indoctrination for white children about how they are better than everyone else. And when they don't play with other children and they don't interact with other children, they start to think that that might be true.
Yeah, that's right. And the public schools have been a really excellent place for people to interact. I mean, that is one of the amazing things that has happened in this country in the past 2, 3 generations since the desegregation of the schools is that we have just by dint of experience, by interacting with each other, we have like mentally, intellectually, like just blown a hole in the history passed down from generation to generation of that sort of institutional prejudice. And there's so many other
Yeah.
things that need to be done. But for most of the people we know now, except for the very oldest, they have gone through and they know people who are of different races, and that was not always the case. And we can and we know that like the myths of race that have controlled us for so long have have been blown apart. And on that level, and there are a lot of other levels too, there has been success. But they would like to retreat from that. They would like to sink back into the muck of bigotry and prejudice and make sure that we are that much more controlled. They're doing it with regards to race. They're doing it with regards to gender, as we see with the Dobbs decision, and they're doing it with regards to environmental regulation because it seems like the Supreme
Mhm.
Court is about to render an enormous decision in favor of companies being able to do whatever the fuck they want with regard to decisions on regulations, that regulatory agencies will no longer have the flexibility to interpret regulations in a sensible way, in the way that the law was intended, and
Yeah.
will have to default to like whatever company is belching out whatever guck into the environment that they want.
I really want people to understand this. So the Chevron deference, sorry,
Mhm.
is that when Congress writes a law, sometimes because they aren't doctors, because they aren't in an industry like retail or physicians or whatever, they write a law and they leave things ambiguous because the regulatory body that we have in our government will come in and fill in those gaps.
Right.
They understand because they have experts on their panel. They have industry people who worked in that industry for years. Sometimes they have lobbyists. I don't always agree with the people they have on the panel, but I do agree that these people are knowledgeable about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And your congressman may not be, but their job is to legislate it. So they leave things ambiguous so that the people who know can come in. Now, where the Chevron difference comes in is that the courts defer to the legislation. If the legislation has an ambiguity, they defer to the EPA
Right.
or the FDA or one of those other branches that handles this and their panels and their experts on how it should be interpreted. Because again, the judge definitely isn't knowledgeable of this. They went to law school.
Of course
They
not. Right.
don't know.
Right. You
So
have to have someone who actually knows their stuff. And if you don't, it's just going to default to whatever like the most powerful force there is. And if the and if the government is deferring, then it's going to be the corporation. It's going to be the person who's spewing stuff out into the environment because they've managed to accumulate the capital in order to gain that power.
yes. So I want you guys to think about Chevron gas.
Yeah.
They knew for decades
And
before the 80s when we really started talking about global warming and science and all that stuff, but they knew they had been doing studies. They knew that their product was screwing our planet,
yeah.
screwing the environment, screwing the atmosphere itself,
Hmm.
and they kept that to themselves.
Yeah.
If we don't if the Supreme Court overturns this, what they're saying is Chevron is now a template. That what they did with the environment is a template for all other corporations to
Yeah.
behave. They may collect the data, they may know it, they can store it in a room in the back, and they don't ever have to do anything about it because no regulatory body is going to have oversight when it comes to any legislation or any laws,
Right.
any actions being taken against them. Somebody is injured. Let's take those airbags with
Right.
Toyota a couple of years
Right.
ago, right?
Hmm.
It all happened because people started suing. There was a class action lawsuit. Those lawsuits will not happen. And Tanaka will not have to tell anybody that they put in faulty airbags. And so people will die and there will be no recourse.
That's a very good point that it's not just the environment. It's basically every level of life that is regulated is going to get less regulated and it's going to get more capitalized as a result. Like big companies and big corporate forces are going to, as a result of what is likely to be this decision, they're going to have more power to screw you over and screw the environment over than they did before. And government will have less power. And I keep coming back to it, and I've done it in a couple of different podcasts, is like people are always told that regulation is just a horrible thing. You know, it goes back to, and probably before, but certainly it was encapsulated in Ronald Reagan's, like the scariest words in the English language are "I'm from the government and I'm here to."
Yeah.
Well, the government really is here to help, and the government is us working collectively. That is what the government, is when it works well. That is what it is supposed to be. It is not supposed to be someone that just signs off on corporate malfeasance. But that is, in effect, what this decision would put us towards. This decision from the Supreme Court that is now being considered. And it looks like the conservative majority on the court is likely to go back to a standard that defers not to regulatory agencies, but to, again, to those companies. And that goes for the EPA. It goes for the Federal Trade Commission. It goes for the federal communications industry. It goes to industry after industry, transportation. I mean, think about the trains that have derailed in the last
Yeah.
year or so. All of those are going to have more lax regulations, and they're going to be more crashes, and we're going to hear about it more and more in the news. Like everything that you can think of that the government came in at one point and says, "Hey, we need to like put a stop to this or put the brakes on this because you as massive corporations are messing this up and screwing up our lives." They're going to step back from that, and that is bad news. That is almost the worst that I can manage because imagine because it is so comprehensive. Like
Yes.
when Republicans fight these culture war things, and they are important, in and of themselves. But the reason that they do it primarily is not really because they care about abortion. It's not because they care about trans people, for example. Although many there are actually large numbers of bigots who are either seriously into that or exploited by it. I don't mean to minimize it, but what I'm trying to get across is the idea that the people who are structuring these campaigns from the far right are essentially not interested in those things. They are essentially interested in extracting as much wealth as possible through whatever means necessary. And this, I think, is their ultimate goal, is to like have the government step back and unleash the sluices of evil so that more wealth can be extracted, no matter what it does to you and me and the planet.
And I want to bring this all the way down because, we talked about the environment, we talked about cars. Let's bring it down to food, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now, the FDA allows one maggot per 250 milliliters of canned fruit juice. Think about those little cherries, the
One
maraschino
maggot.
cherries.
It's
One maggot is allowed. How many maggots do you need in your cherries, folks? One maggot is one maggot too much for me, but
how
that currently is allowed by the FDA.
how
How many
many
maggots do you think Mike Johnson would like you to have?
how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Tootsie Pop?
We're talking about our food. We're talking about our water.
Oh,
We're
I
talking about
know.
our products. If you have sensitivity to things and they don't have to tell you what's in things because of right now, if there's a certain amount of something, they have to tell you. Other than that, they don't. So when they say sugar free, they just mean up to the percentage that they have to report, it is sugar free. There's sugar in there, trust me.
Yeah.
Imagine if we don't even have these and we complain about these regulations not being enough sometimes. Imagine they're gone. Seriously, folks, maggots in your food.
So I never read it in high school or college like a lot of people did. I'm finally getting around to listening to an audiobook version of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. That, as many people know, is a book about the stockyards of Chicago, and one like the horrible living conditions that immigrants went through to when they came to America, and the horrific things that they went through and that were done to them and that were done to our food as a result of what was going on in the late 19th and early 20th century. And they were horrific things. There were, body parts that, went into meat because, conveyor belts were not stopped, that sort of things, in slaughterhouses and
Mm-hmm.
processing plants. That book was written in 1906. That's 118 years ago. That is where they want to go back to.
Yeah.
Want to talk about the FDA and food regulations. They want to take us back that far so that like they don't care how many maggots are in our food. They don't care how many fingers are in our food as long as they can keep making the money. they don't really care. They'll slap a nice